Happy Mother's Day, moms. That's been our feature today, and we're grateful to celebrate you today. And we're finishing up our series on Amazing Journey. I had a video I was going to run. It's about a minute long. We've seen enough video today. I don't want to damage or damper the Mother's Day video you just saw. So let's dig into the text today as we finish up this series on family and the relationship of family. And I'm probably going to take this a different direction than you think just by that word. When our teams finished, and we'll give them some awards later today, when our teams finished, I asked them one question. What's one lesson you learned from this experience? What's one lesson whether you're with your brother, sister, a spouse, a friend, what did you learn from that? And one of them said how great it was to have a faithful friend. And I appreciated that. I wrote it down because it's what I want to land on today as we fast forward to the end of your life. If you could fast forward to the end of your life and look back, what would you have learned from the experience? What did you discover about relationships? Well, that's what we're going to see today in 2 Samuel chapter 9 as we look at this final thought about relationships and the amazing journey that they come to. I want to back up to chapter 8, starting at verse 15, just read a couple verses to you that shows what it looks like to fast forward to the end of your life and look back. Here's what reads in this story of David at the end, or into the midst of his reign. It says in verse 15 of chapter 8, David reigned over all Israel, doing what was just and right for all his people. Now Joab, son of Zeruiah, was over the army. Jehoshaphat, son of Ahilud, was recorder. Zadok, son of Ahitub, and Ahimelech, say all these names with you, son of Abiathar, were priests. And Sariah was secretary. And Benaiah, son of Jediah, was over the Karanites and Pelethites, the people that were running the temple and the area of Jerusalem. And David's sons were priests. Now, why would I read all those names? I want you to see that David is reflecting on his leadership as king, and what he notices is all the people around him. What he sees is all the people that made him successful. You do not become a success on your own. Well, let me just say that again. That's for every mom and every child, every person in this room. You do not become a success on your own. Your life's outcomes are built on relationships. So if you want better outcomes, get the hint, have better relationships. All of your life's outcomes are built on that. And that's why David took time, and it's recorded in this story of 2 Samuel, that he took time and looked around his life and said, look at all the people that helped me become successful. Look at all the people that did things around me that made this kingdom what it is. I didn't do this on my own. For sure, God did it. But look at all the other people that surround me that made it happen. See, some people feel like it's people that limit their success. I had a boss years and years ago when I first started my career, and he had this common line he would say all the time: business is great if it weren't for the people. Come on, have you heard that before? Parenting would be great if it weren't for the kids. No, that's not true. Church would be great if it weren't for the members. That's not true. I loved what I heard from Trey Lance, the newly drafted San Francisco 49er. You don't even have to follow the 49ers to appreciate his story. The first thing he did after he was drafted was he contacted all the people in his life to thank them for what they invested in him to bring him to this moment in his life. And friends, before we go any further, before we talk about the one thing that makes your finish do well, I just want to pause for a second. I know it's Mother's Day. We need to honor our moms. But there are other people in your life as well that you need to thank today. There are other people in your life that have helped you become who you are. And it's appropriate to take time to appreciate them. To recognize that you are who you are based on the relationships that have been around you. Now, David does that And I want you to see that there's this direct link between chapter 8 and 9. This is not like a long pause for years or whatever. He goes right into chapter 9, and the first thing that comes out of his mouth is the thing that's on his head. This is what he's thinking about. And he's looking back at his life, and he's looking around his life, and he's seeing all these relationships that have invested in David to bring him to this moment in his life, in his kingship. And there's one name that he looks back on and says, if there was one person that changed my life, it's this person. If there's one person that invested in me better than anybody else, it's this one. And if there's one person I need to thank, it's this guy, but he's not here to thank. Look at chapter 9, verse 1. David asked, "Is there anyone still left of the house of Saul to whom I can show kindness to for Jonathan's sake?" Is there anybody that I can show a kindness back to that Jonathan showed me? Is there anybody that I can do something for because of what Jonathan did for me? I just want you to hold on to that today. Because what he's describing there and what we're going to learn about Jonathan today is one word: faithfulness. If you want to describe Jonathan in a word, that's the word: faithfulness. Everybody say it with me? Faithfulness. You want to take a little snapshot at the end of your life and look back? I'm going to tell you what you're going to see. You look back on your life and you point to the people that had the most impact on your life, and I'm going to tell you the one thing that's consistent with them is that they are faithful. And I want to show you that today in this text. Because if you can do one thing right for the rest of your life, if I had no more messages to preach to you, this would be the word I'd want to leave with you. Be faithful. Look at what it says here. Is there anyone that can bless him? And now there was a servant of Saul's household named Ziba. They summoned him to appear before David, and the king said to him, "Are you Ziba?" "Yes, I'm Ziba, at your service," he replied. And the king said, "Is there no one still alive from the house of Saul to whom I can show God's kindness to?" And Ziba answered the king, "There is still a son of Jonathan." How about that? He's lame in both feet. "Where is he?" the king asked. And Ziba answered, "He's at the house of Machir, son of Amiel, in Lo-debar." So King David had him brought from Lo-debar, from the house of Machir, son of Amiel. Now pause right there. I want you to get a feel for this story. Jonathan is long since dead. He died with his dad in battle. And now, long after that, there's one son remaining of his household. All these others have died. All of his estate is gone. All of the money is gone. Everything that he was as a king is now lost. And all that's left is the small family farm in Lo-debar, where the son of Jonathan is remaining. And David summons him to come, because he wants him to be a part of the family of David. I want you to see that this is about Jonathan, not David. Do you see that? It's the faithfulness of Jonathan that is setting this story up. Jonathan was so faithful to David. Do you remember the stories? When Saul couldn't go to battle against Goliath and David took on Goliath and defeated him with the sling, it was Jonathan that was there to accompany David and loved him like a brother. When Saul is ready to kill David, it's Jonathan that's standing for him and defending him against his own dad. When Jonathan hears about the plot against David from his dad, he sends him off to protect him. And yet, Jonathan's not only faithful to David and faithful to his Lord and faithful to the kingdom, he's even faithful to his dad, staying with his dad to the very end, fighting the battles with his dad, ends up dying the same day as his father. Jonathan, if there's one word that describes him, was faithful. And here's what I want you to see about faithfulness. Faithfulness outlasts your lifespan. Long after Jonathan's dead, here's what's going on. They're blessing the son of Jonathan. Why? Because Jonathan was faithful. I love that story. Your faithfulness outlasts your lifespan. In 1912, Dr. William Leslie felt the calling of God to go to the Congo, jungle area. He spent 17 years there as a missionary, trying to bring the gospel, trying to translate it into the language of the people there, the indigenous people there. And he would work over and over. He developed an education system, trying to help the people. But by 17 years later, he was so discouraged, he just said, I'm done. Goes back to the United States, feels like he failed, gives up the ministry, dies a few years later. That was in 1929. In 2010, a guy by the name of Eric Ramsey of Tom Cox World Ministries shows up at the exact same location. They expected that maybe the indigenous people there knew the name of Jesus, but had no idea about who he was or what he did for them or how he really functioned. Never had the Bible translated into their language. That's what they expected when they showed up. What they found was a growing number of replicating churches in the Congo area that were established by Dr. Leslie. Shocked to find in every village churches that were thriving. They had what he called amazing choirs. They didn't call them that, but they had choirs in each village that would sing the glory of Jesus. They were writing their own songs and passing them between churches. They were replicating and planting new churches and raising leaders, all because Dr. Leslie was courageous and faithful. And it went on for centuries, for generations after that. Someone's faithfulness blessed their life. And today, somebody's faithfulness has blessed yours. Somebody's faithfulness in the past has given you what you needed to be here today. Somebody's faithfulness in the past has inspired you to watch online today. Somebody's faithfulness in the past has brought you to know Jesus. Somebody's faithfulness in the past has encouraged you to walk with God. Can I get an amen? It's somebody's faithfulness that inspires you. And the most faithful of all is the one who died for you. And his faithfulness outlasted his lifespan on earth. Friends, your faithfulness matters because it outlasts your life. David is wanting to bless this son. So King David in verse 6 brings Mephibosheth in, and when Mephibosheth, say that a few times fast. When Mephibosheth, son of Jonathan, the son of Saul, came to David, he bowed down to pay him honor. And David said, Mephibosheth, at your service, he replied, don't be afraid. For I will surely show you kindness for the sake of your father Jonathan. I'm doing this because of the faithfulness of your father. I will restore to you all the land that belonged to your grandfather Saul, and you will always eat at my table. And Mephibosheth bowed down and said, what is your servant that you should notice a dead dog like me? Like all my wealth has been gone. The kingdom we used to have has disappeared. The stuff that I used to live with when my dad had me is disappeared. It's gone. I have nothing to my name. And now you're going to bless me in this way? Well, that's true. Why? Not because of you, Mephibosheth, but because of Jonathan. I'm not blessing you because you did something to earn it. I'm blessing you because Jonathan was faithful. And your faithfulness outproduces your wealth. See, I know this will shock you, but you can't save enough to bless your future family. You can't earn enough to pay for their future. It can disappear just like that. But there is one thing you can do. You can be faithful, and God can bless your future family in the way he wants. And I don't know if I can tell this story without emotion, but I was reminded recently of a story way back when Diana and I were in Ohio and are raising our daughter Heather. We left church one day and we went down to the local Chili's just down the street from the church. We were having lunch after church one day, and I can't describe this in words. I'm not sure how to explain it other than to say I just felt like God was telling me to pay attention to this old lady with a cane that was in one of the booths by herself. Every time I would try to say, forget about it, I just kept feeling my nudge to watch this lady. Finally, when our host came up, I said, listen, when we get done here, would you add that lady's bill to mine? I know, don't expect that when you leave for lunch today. I'm just saying, would you add that lady's bill to mine? I just want to pay for her meal. I don't even know what made me do it other than the prompting of the Lord. So later on, when she's asking for the bill and it's not coming, and the host for her says, well, somebody's already paid for it. Well, who paid for it? And the guy points to me, and I just waved. I was trying not to make a big deal of it. And she just started tearing up. Well, then I felt like God's pushing me out of my chair to go talk to her. So I go over and introduce myself. She asked me to sit down. I said, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to make you emotional. I just felt like I was supposed to buy your meal today. No big deal. She goes, oh, no, you don't get it. She said, I was married to a minister for over 50 years. He died a few years back. And he always said that God would take care of me. And this is just another example of God providing something for me when I couldn't provide it for myself. And I had to hold back my tears because it instantly hit me that there might be a day where Diana's without me. And how can I save enough money, and how can I put enough aside, and how can I set up an estate, how can I set up a retirement to take care of her the rest of her life? I can't. But I know the one who can. See, your faithfulness outproduces your wealth. Mephibosheth is blown away. And then the king summoned Ziba, the servant of the family, and Saul's steward, and said to him, I've given your master's grandson everything that belonged to Saul and his family. You and your sons and your servants are to farm the land for him and bring in the crops so that your master's grandson may be provided for. And Mephibosheth, grandson of your master Saul, will always eat at my table. Now Ziba had 15 sons and 20 servants. This was a life position for Ziba. He's got his career set up for him. He's going to be blessed for the rest of his life because now he's got an income and a service to the king of the land. And Ziba said to the king, your servant will do whatever my lord the king commands his servants to do. So Mephibosheth ate at David's table like one of the king's sons. And I want you to notice verse 12. It's just a hidden verse in the scriptures. Mephibosheth, the son of Jonathan, he had a young son named Mica. And all the members of Ziba's household were servants of Mephibosheth, and Mephibosheth lived in Jerusalem because he always ate at the king's table. He was lame in both feet. A guy who can't earn a living, can't produce for himself, he not only gets blessed by his dad's faithfulness, but now he gets to see his son be blessed by his dad's faithfulness. See, I don't care what the sacrifice is, what you have to give up, what you have to do, how you have to serve. When you're faithful, your faithfulness will outreward your sacrifice. Isn't it interesting that when David came back from that battle with Goliath, Jonathan was ready to give up the kingdom to David. He knew he was anointed. He knew he was going to be the next king. He didn't fight it. He didn't argue with it. He just served the next king. Because that's what God chose to do. And it was his faithfulness that would bless his grandson. Where? At the king's table. His faithfulness allowed his son and grandson to sit with the king. It's amazing that your faithfulness can outlive your life, can outproduce your wealth, and can out reward your sacrifice. But you live in a world that wants to tell you, oh, you got to live for yourself, you got to do for yourself, you got to save for yourself, you got to be for yourself. And that would be unfaithful to the God who has given you so much. The reward for great relationships, listen, the reward for great relationships is not less relationships. The reward for great relationships and great work and great service and great sacrifice, you know what it is? It's more relationships. I know people don't like that. Oh, I want to retire and have less. No, David receives more because David is growing the family of God in his midst. And he's honoring Jonathan's faithfulness to do it. One last Mother's Day story, and then I'll close. Elise Grinnell tells the story of having her kids home, most of them adult, for one last Mother's Day. And they're sitting around the table, and they're talking about stories. And we haven't quite had this one yet in my family, but maybe you've experienced this where you sit around the table and you tell mom all the stories that she didn't know about. You know what I'm talking about? One of them says, well, Mom, do you remember when you were asking, why is the slats falling out of the bed years ago? Do you remember that? Yeah, I remember that. You know why? It was because we were jumping on the beds and we didn't tell you. And she goes, yeah, I know. I knew. One says, well, wait a second. If you knew about that, do you remember what happened to my lima beans every time you served them? You knew how much I hated lima beans. You remember what happened? I would take a napkin, I'd wrap them in the napkin, then I'd have to go to the bathroom, and I'd flush them down the toilet. And Mom said, yeah, I suspected. I wondered why you needed to take the napkin to the bathroom. Then the third one said, well, I got one other story for you, Mom. Do you remember when you couldn't figure out who put the peanut butter sandwich in the VCR? Now, some of you you're way too young to know what a VCR is. That stands for video cassette recorder. Just saying. Some of you probably know what that is. I won't name names. Yes, Mom said, I knew exactly who did that. And finally they said, well, Mom, why in the world did you put up with us all those years? And here's what she said. I just love the story because of the line at the end. She said, it was easy. Because you were my own. It was easy because you were my own. Do you know why Jonathan was faithful to David? Because to Jonathan, David was his own. Do you know why people are family in your life instead of just acquaintances? Because to you, those people are your own. And I'll just say it. When we stop treating people as enemies and start treating people like they're our own, you will find yourself surrounded by friends and relationships and family. We need a nation to start acting like we are all our own. We need to be churches where we start to act like, guess what? We're all our own. And if you want to look at the end of your life back and see all the people that have influenced your life that have had an impact on you, guess what? They treated you like you were their own. So be faithful. That's the simple message on Mother's Day 2021. Be faithful. Be a faithful investor of relationships. How do I do that? Well, go back and listen to all the messages from this series. Start with you. Be faithful to what God designed you to be. Not what the world wants to say, not what you want to selfishly. You be faithful to what God designed you to be, and you will discover that you're a faithful person as well. Start being a friend instead of waiting for friends to come to you. I love Josh's message on that. Be a friend. You'll find all kinds of friends around. And be the first in your marriage to honor, to apologize, to forgive, to serve. And like Sandra shared last week, be present. That's what faithful people do. It's been an amazing journey. Great way to conclude on Mother's Day. And I want to thank the moms out there who have been faithful. Not perfect, not always correct. Don't tell my mom that. But faithful. And I want to encourage you today that if you've never done it, to turn back to the one who's been faithful to you. Mother's Day would be a great day to turn back to the Father and thank him for the Son who was so faithful that he was willing to die just for you. Jesus, we thank you for that. We celebrate today, not because Mother's Day is more important than any other day, but because it's another demonstration of your creative power and work that causes us to reflect, to be thankful, and yes, to be faithful. Bless our moms today, and especially bless all of us as we appreciate all those who have gone faithfully before us. We praise you and thank you in Jesus' name.